From SBI's Executive Briefing Center in Dallas, Texas, the most watched and listened to content in B2B sales and marketing, it's the SBI Podcast with your host, Matt Shares.
Welcome to SBI TV, a weekly show dedicated to helping you make your number. Recent studies show that private equity acquisitions and mergers are at an all-time high, and it doesn't seem to show the signs of letting up. We actually see it increasing. So we're here today to discuss the ramifications of being a sales leader and how to design, manage, and execute the integration effort when you combine multiple sales forces over time in a series of acquisitions. This is tough stuff, and somebody I have on the show today is an absolute expert, and I can't wait for you to hear what we're going to have to say. So I'm your host, Matt Shares. I'm the CEO of SBI. Joining me today in the studio is Meredith Kildow. She's the Managing Director of Global Revenue from Concilio. So Meredith, first off, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Great to see you. I would love for you, because you have great domain expertise, but before we kind of get into the guts of the show, I would love for you just to introduce yourself, introduce Concilio, and maybe tell the world how we should think about what it is Concilio does.
Sure. So, as you said, I run the global revenue organization for us, which consists of sales, account management, and consulting. Concilio is really, I think you can think about us as problem solvers. We help multinational corporations and their outside counsel deal with issues related to legal litigation, spend optimization. We have consulting groups that even will help them implement new technologies, matter management, e-billing.
Got it.
Sort of full spectrum just to help them ease their risk.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and prior to you leading all of revenue for Concilio, tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you start your sales career?
My illustrious career.
Yes.
So I actually started in operations. I've always been in professional services. Worked for Burson Marsteller, JWT, so within the WPP family for 13 years. Yeah. Moved to Hitachi Consulting, which brought me to Dallas, and then moved to Huron Legal, which Concilio acquired.
There you go. All right. Well, great to have you on the show. So Meredith and I, as you can tell with a background like Meredith's and what Concilio does, she's got great expertise not only in professional services, but also in putting organizations together. So if you're watching or listening out there, you don't want to miss SBI's weekly show. If you want to access our content library, if you're an iPhone user, download the SBI app, go to the Apple App Store, search for Sales Benchmark Index. Then you can use your iPhone notifications. You can listen to us on your commute, on your workout, or while you're traveling. All right, so let's jump into the questions. So, Meredith, if I think about sales leaders and in an acquisition orientation, right? Not a lot of sales leaders grow up thinking about how do I put all of these different companies together. And for those of you that are watching, if you think about the craft of building a sales force from the ground up, now think about a new skill set. Is how do you put multiple sales forces together in an integration? So integration is the word we use in M&A, and it's described a set of activities to bring together two or more companies in a rapid fashion. So we at SBI find that putting them together is incredibly challenging for leaders who've kind of had one point of view and then these disparate organizations come together. I guess just level set, how do you approach the overall sort of people and structure of putting an organization together?
Well, it's evolved over time, and every time we do this, I learn a little bit more. I think from a high level, I approach it with as much humility as I can, and I say that because every organization has perfected what they come to the table with. And so I think if you approach it with truly looking for the best practices of every organization and incorporating them into your own, you end up with, I mean, A, a better product, but B, you also bring those people in faster. And that's really the goal, right? Is to bring everybody in, tuck everybody in, and get back to selling.
Okay, so then if I'm watching or listening to the show, I say, all right, here come these disparate organizations. And I'm structured one way, organization B is structured one way, organization C has a different structure. Now I need to determine the best structure for the new co, right, which is the new company. How have you done that? How do you think through that?
So it depends, on the size of the acquisition or merger, right? I think we handle them differently depending on if it's a small acquisition that we're making. The tendency would be structure doesn't really change. We tuck them in, bring them in to our organization. If we're talking about like-size organizations, which we've done, we've even had a reverse acquisition where the acquiring was smaller. So I think if you're of a like size, you get lucky sometimes and you have very similar structure and process. If it's different, there's a tendency always to want to do it the way that you know how. I think the key is really understanding what then will continue to drive those people. So if the structure you feel confident with is the one that you're going to run with, then it becomes a change management component. And then it's about making sure people understand why, that it's not going to impact their ability to earn, that they actually may find bigger value from that. And so then it becomes more about the training, the onboarding of those people. If you're going to change your process, you also need to know you're taking on change management then for the whole team, even existing.
So, and if I was a sales leader or a CEO watching this, and I would say to myself, is there a set of steps that you take to sort of step back and say, okay, the new company now looks like this in terms of size, reach, depth of product line. So should we move from hunter-farmer to more of a stratification model? Like maybe the old system, and what we see from my vantage point is a lot of companies go, the acquired entities now run our structure. As opposed to saying, if I was starting the company tomorrow and I map the way the customer buys and where they get value, the structure of the organization might need to look like this. So how do you rationalize a clean sheet of paper with the speed of let's get them in, get them integrated, and go?
Well, so I actually view it in two phases. I view integration as phase one, and I view go forward as phase two. Because the goals are different. In the integration phase, it is much more about making sure that every single person knows who their boss is, what system they are being asked to track everything in, how the process is going to work. The go forward may have some adjustments to that. So there are things that you have to do in my mind immediately. And then there are things, to your point, as you start to scope out this new organization, we've had moments where, hey, span of control, we need to add a region. We need more management here. There's too many folks here to not, put something in place. So we look at that. But to me, those are the things that are your go forward organization. They aren't necessarily critical day one. What's critical day one is making sure everybody feels part of the whole.
That's great. Okay, that's a great tip. All right, so my last question in this segment is, you think about now you've got customers that have gone from working with company A to the new entity. You've got competitors saying, ooh, Concilio now used to look like this, now it looks like this. So there's stuff happening in the marketplace. How do you rationalize the other stakeholders in an integration?
Yeah, so it's interesting. It all centers around people, because the thing we hear the most from our clients during these is just don't mess with my team. I like my people. It's why I was there. So, it all comes back to the ability for you to keep the talent, keep the performance. And this is not just sales, right? This is across the organization. But people are sticky to clients. And until you gain the trust from the client that you're really not going to interrupt their service delivery or how they function within your organization, the thing you have are their people. So yes, we see plenty of that. And actually in our space, there's so much M&A activity. Some companies do it well. Some companies have not. So there is a general trepidation, I think, around, lots of integration activities. I do think when you make it a priority and your clients understand that, they maybe go in with a little bit less fear about it.
All right. So as we wrap up that segment, if you think about a couple of the keys that Meredith left us with, is the separation around integration as phase one, and then optimization, if you will, and I'm paraphrasing, as you think about phase two. Second component is the communication internally with the team and with customers and competitors, because competitors are going to be jumping on this opportunity to say, ooh, this is an opportunity to go after customers. So your ability to say, steady state, over communicate internally with people, right? Because all of their emotions are high. What does this mean for me? Is my territory changing, et cetera? All right. So now we're going to talk, go into a segment talking about systems and processes, because this is something that comes up all the time. And there's something, I guess you can almost say it's Murphy's Law, but every time we see two companies merging, they always seem to have different CRMs, right? Everybody watching is like, oh my God, yeah, we've got different sales process and different this and different marketing automation. So how do you decide which process stays, which one goes? Which CRM is the best CRM? Like, what do you do?
So from a CRM standpoint, we've been fairly lucky. We actually have had a bunch that were all the same. But in that case, so, we look at customizations, we look at what's built behind it. So in our case, we've spent a lot of time and a lot of development resources. Our CRM system kicks off all downstream systems, connects to all of our different systems, talks to them. So very unlikely that we're going to replace that because it would break all that. But we look at what other companies have built. And we say, oh, could we incorporate that into our CRM? Could we, develop and customize? Because that was a good idea. So again, I think we look to take best practices. In terms of process, again, we look for most developed. We look for ROI, what has been working, what salespeople are responding to. I look at it a lot the same way that you said about structure. It's an opportunity to get better every time. I think helpful in this is that every single person on my management team came by way of acquisition. So we've all walked in those shoes. We know what that feels like, those first few months where you're like, what's happening? Do I have a phone? Do I, all of that. So I think because we all approach it that way, we really do look for what is working in other organizations and try to incorporate that. In terms of, overall process, again, we've spent a lot of time and a lot of energy building ours. So we will try as much as possible to build in those great things that we're bringing into the company, but within sort of a skeleton that we've created.
So one thing I want to key on that you said, you talked about we look for best developed process as opposed to our process. And audience watching and listening, I don't want you to miss this. So Meredith is talking about it doesn't matter necessarily who's right, it's what's right. So if I am to infer from that, if one of the acquired entities has a better sales process that you feel is more aligned with how buyers buy and different tools they're using, let's take that 1 + 1 = 5 as opposed to we're acquiring you, so you do everything our way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because I will tell you, many of your peers don't do that. They say, if I'm writing the check, I'm in charge, we do it our way, right? I'm the big kid on the schoolyard, right? So we're going to do things my way, as opposed to bringing them together. So that's that's very insightful. So my last question in this segment, we're thinking about systems and process and tools, but just the sheer volume of work. So how do you think about, what do you guys do? What does a third party do? How do you support the sales ops team? Because I see, and you grew up in operations, so you have empathy, right? More than the classic salesperson and sales leader would. But how do you just get your head around all of that of what should you do, who should do what, and how do you leverage third parties?
Yeah, so I think it's a hybrid because there are definitely things that you can't farm out to a third party. They're just too specific to your organization. I think Concilio takes a really nice approach to this. We have an office of integration that lives within our company that has dedicated people. They do a lot of the heavy lifting. So in terms of, sort of crunching numbers, analysis, the work behind, they help with that. So that you're not taking your entire management and ops team out of their daily jobs. The other thing I think about this is sales is first in, first out with an integration. So our work really starts way before anyone else's. Because as soon as word gets out, you're getting calls from your clients, you're getting calls salespeople to salespeople. So I also find that introducing the sales ops teams of the two early on, letting them get a head start on a lot of it so that it's not just this huge, lump of work with a really tight deadline. Give yourself as much room as you can. But I think you have to have a hybrid. I think you have to have some people come in third party that can have a, objective point of view, but can also do some of that heavy lifting.
Yep. And, you mentioned about first in, first out for sales. The sales people by nature are emotional beings, right? Sure. So they naturally will say, ooh, what does this mean for me? And, should I go work for a competitor? Does this mean I need to look for a job? Or is my job in jeopardy? And you're trying to communicate.
Or can I ask for a raise?
Yeah, is this the time to ask for a raise? Maybe now I can get some equity. So anything that you share relative to just the human side, because you put sales ops together, but is there a role that HR or that you kind of mitigate the emotional narrative of the sales reps?
Yeah, I think HR has a huge role, obviously, in integrations. I think sales management is actually your best, advocate, ambassador during that. The reality is everybody asks, what does this mean for me? That's what the clients ask. That's what the salespeople want to know. And the faster you can answer that for them, the faster the fears go away. So, I think one of the biggest things that they need in that instance is they need to know who their manager is. So that's usually the first thing that we do is adjust the management team to tuck in whatever managers we're going to from the incoming company. Let everybody know who then is their manager, because ultimately they want that one person to go to ask all those questions. Make sure you're communicating a lot out, but give them a path to communicate in. I think the biggest thing, and this is true for anything, but especially for an integration, the fastest way to make a salesperson emotional is mess with their comp.
Amen.
So that's one of the first things we say is, we will go in a natural cycle for compensation, but we're not changing anybody's comp today.
Yep. Very good. So one tip I would give the listeners before Meredith and I move into our last segment, if you think about frontline sales management and Meredith's point about the role they play, most frontline managers are not experienced dealing with integrations. So the toolkit required and the coaching that they need to properly enable the new sales reps that they're picking up, and almost think about it like a series of FAQs that you would use, and also equipping them over a 30 to 60 day timeline is critical. So that would be another takeaway I would give you that we see from our vantage point. So this last segment, Meredith and I are going to talk about accelerated timelines, because most plans that we see for post-merger integration have crazy accelerated timelines, especially if you're owned by a private equity firm, which many of our clients have a tendency to be owned by, and you are not alone in that vein. So the pressure that's put on the investment thesis and the integration plan is significant. So first question, Meredith, how do you compress the timelines?
So I think this is critical. I think you have to look at the things that have to happen immediately and the things that don't have to. You can still achieve the benchmark and the timeline laid out, in an integration schedule, if you will, without packing it all in first 3 weeks. So, there are things you can bring everybody into your sales process without changing what they're selling, right? So especially things that have interdependencies on other parts in your company. So for us, what they sell has a big interdependency on operations. I can't force them. I can't rush them. And a lot of times that's one of the most, lengthy things, combining workflows. So we can bring in a new sales process, methodology, do all that training, all that change management, and not change what they're selling. That can come later.
That's great.
So things like, combined ELs, proposals, all of that can come later.
Yeah.
We just need everybody on the same page. Compensation is another one of those, right? Yep. You can start to socialize, you can start to get everybody thinking in the same way, but you don't have to snap to one comp plan in 2 months. So I try to pick the things that I think are the most critical to getting our sales team back out selling fast, and then take our time with the things, that we can.
Love it. So incredibly important point that Meredith made, the have-tos versus the what you would like to. And the point on comp is so critical. You don't have to change their comp plan just because the logo changes. People are selling, they know their products, they've been working in that. It's going to take you a while to have them fluent in the new products, depending on how many there are, and you're still probably thinking through if the new reps can sell all of your offering, et cetera. So understanding the criticality, I love the power of threes, Meredith, when it comes to initiatives. And I believe that if I'm an individual and there's 3 things I can focus on, I can do that fairly effectively. Once I start to tip into 4 and 5, it's like, now I feel like I'm thrashing. All right, so my last question is around, and it's a tough one, but we'll finish with this, and I know you can handle it. Common culture.
Yeah.
What are the 2 or 3 things that you've done in your experience to take the disparate organizations from a Salesforce perspective and create a common sales culture so that 1 + 1 + 1 truly can equal 5? Because that's hard to quantify in an investment thesis.
Yeah.
It's never, ever in an investment thesis for a private equity firm, but it's a real thing that we see. So, advice?
So, I think the first thing is you have to be able to articulate your culture. You have to really know what that culture is. I think, this is actually, I think, where you see the most integrations go south. Yep. Because if you don't integrate to a common culture, you're just disparate organizations operating under one umbrella. Yep. And especially for a sales team, to be a team, to have a common thread, to feel the same values, I think makes it more successful. So, we have a strong culture. It's probably, I won't say the most important, one of the most important things to me. I think there are things that are really simple about being able to tell people what your culture is, give them the honest, this is who we are. The other thing that I think is funny, and our CEO does this extremely well, but reaching out to every salesperson in the beginning, in those first few days, they need to feel that accessibility. They need to understand that culture isn't just words on a page, that's truly how the leadership feels. Yep. So introducing yourself to them. And then I think, the biggest part of an integration from a culture perspective is walking that walk. Yep. So, if we say we're competitive but collaborative, we have to show that and prove to people that this is who we are and they want to be a part of that team.
Fantastic. All right, so that was a jam-packed show, and I knew Meredith would deliver, and obviously you did. So Meredith, wonderful to see you, and thanks for stopping by the studio. I appreciate your insight. For those of you that were watching, as you think about walking into an integration and what needs to happen, the last point I would give you relative to culture is this whole concept around the values that you drive as an organization. And most companies have 4 to 6 core values. The values have to be action-oriented, defined as you have to be able to catch people living the values. So if you're sitting there right now and you're thinking about your sales culture, and if you called all of your sales managers and your sales reps and you said, tell me about the core values we have and how we activate them on a daily basis. If you can't catch people demonstrating your core values and how they interact with a customer or a prospect, you don't have them, they're not alive. So, as always, I wish you good luck as you try and make your number. Great job.
This has been the SBI Podcast. For more information on the studio, SBI's Executive Briefing Center, our team, or to schedule a workshop, please visit salesbenchmarkindex.com.